You were one of the first to come out, and everyone kind of followed along, that we might not get cuts so far in this year because you have things like people refinancing their homes. You have companies who also refinance when rates were low, and it's made an economy less immune to hikes. So put all those together, Torsten, that doesn't sound like a world that's getting back to 2%, that could realistically even get back to 2% if the Fed just holds things where they are. Is that the moment we're at?
I think that is a very significant risk, Danny, because exactly as you're highlighting, a lot of firms prepared themselves for higher interest rates by terming out their debt during the pandemic. A lot of households, almost by definition in the US, have 30-year fixed mortgage rates. So that's about 95% of all mortgages. So they are also therefore less sensitive to interest rates going up. So those things just meant that the transmission mechanism of monetary policy, in other words, the time it takes, the so-called long and variable lags that the Fed members keep talking about, was maybe not only the 12, 18 months that it was in what they normally discuss and what the textbook would predict. Maybe this just takes a lot longer time. And as that chart there you're showing is exactly highlighting, we have more than 50% of mortgages now that are below 4%. So the sensitivity is just not what it used to be. And that means that it needs more time before we achieve the goal. So exactly as you're saying, maybe the risk is that we just need rates higher for longer, which is exactly what we're pointing out.
Do we need something more severe than that if you've got more than 50% with a mortgage below 4%? So the typical drivers of monetary policy are not as effective as they were. And you talk about even a huge swathe of America no longer having a mortgage. Therefore, if the transmission mechanism is not broken, it's just taking a lot longer to deliver. What else can the Fed do to slow the middle class? Because it is the middle class that's living off 5% CDs, their wealth is improving, the upper middle class. So what more must the Fed do? Is it just endure higher for longer than this market really anticipates, or something more severe?
Yeah, this is also really important, Manny. So exactly as you're saying, 40% of those who own a home, they do not have a mortgage. Think about that 40%. That means there's a lot of people when home prices go up who don't have any debt obligations and are therefore benefiting directly when you see asset prices, in this case, home prices, continue to move higher. So what can the Fed do? Well, obviously, the textbook would say, well, the Fed can just raise interest rates more. But there's a number of unfortunate issues around doing that. Namely, if the Fed, after now, have talked about that the next move in rates will be lower, and they still, as we stand here today, have the prediction that we will see 3 cuts this year. Well, if that's the case, well, then it's really difficult to come out and say, well, we were wrong, we'll not get 3 cuts, maybe we need more hikes. So that's why, from a credibility perspective, it's just really difficult for the Fed to go and turn around 180 degrees and talk about rate hikes. So that's why I think that there will probably be a strong preference for saying, you know what, we will probably just keep interest rates higher for longer and let time do its work so that we ultimately get the result that we need. And that's why I still think that the market is wrong, anticipating that we'll get rate cuts this year. I still think that it's going to take a lot more time because also firms have just been through a period where they had much more freedom to set their prices at whatever level they thought was the right one. And that's why the risk is anchoring those expectations is probably going to take more time than what many people expect.